Did this cleaning girl just say she speaks 6 languages? Richard Sterling's laughter cut through the presidential suite like a blade. He didn't even glance up from his $300 per ounce caviar as he waved his hand dismissively. Honey, the only language you need to know is, yes, sir, and your towels are ready. Now get back to scrubbing toilets, where you belong. The 12 international diplomats around the mahogany table fell silent. The smell of expensive cologne couldn't mask the stench of casual cruelty. Liana Brooks stood frozen in the doorway of the Grand Meridian Hotel's most exclusive suite. She stood frozen. Her cleaning cart, still half inside the doorway, one hand clutching a stack of freshly folded towels as if they were armor. She hadn't spoken loudly. She hadn't even meant to interrupt. She had simply answered a question none of them expected her to understand. But now, under the chandelier's cold brilliance, she felt every molecule in the room turn toward her. 12 diplomats, a billionaire, and the suffocating weight of judgment. Sterling's cruel grin lingered in the air like a stain. Liana lowered her eyes, not out of shame, but survival instinct. She knew this look, this brand of humiliation, far too well. People like Richard Sterling carried it like a cologne, expensive, overpowering, and designed to remind her of her place. Her pulse thudded painfully. A familiar ache tightened her throat, but behind it, something else sparked. Her grandmother's voice drifted through her memory. Baby, words are bridges, even the ones people use to walk over you. Liana steadied her breath. She could have backed out quietly. She could have apologized for being heard. She could have disappeared like she always did. But something in the room shifted. One diplomat, tall, polished, and normally expressionless, leaned forward with a spark of curiosity. Another adjusted his earpiece, eyes narrowing. And in that tiny shift, Liana realized something astonishing. While Richard Sterling laughed at her, none of the diplomats were laughing. They were listening. What happens when Liana discovers these powerful men actually need the one skill Sterling just mocked? It was nearly midnight when Liana pushed her cleaning cart down the 50th floor hallway. A place where deals worth billions lived and died behind polished oak doors. She wasn't supposed to hear anything. Housekeepers weren't supposed to hear anything. But tonight, the walls were practically trembling with stress. We're running out of time! A frustrated voice barked from inside the suite. If this misunderstanding isn't cleared up by morning, the entire renewable energy treaty collapses. Another voice snapped back in German, sharp with panic. A third responded in Japanese, slower and more careful, yet heavy with insult. Liana understood it all, every word, every nuance, every cultural misstep that the current experts had completely bungled. She tightened her grip on the cart handle. Her grandmother's voice floated up from memory. Baby, when you have the gift of understanding people, you have a duty to use it. Her heart pounded. Should she knock? Should she walk away? Her mother always said to stay invisible in wealthy spaces. Her professor once said her gift could change international policy. She had chosen survival over dreams, until now. Taking a slow breath, Liana lifted her hand and knocked. The room fell silent. The door swung open. Richard Sterling's irritated face appeared, eyes bloodshot, patience gone. What do you want? He growled. Liana met his gaze steadily. I couldn't help overhearing, she said. I believe I know exactly what went wrong with your negotiations. Behind him, the officials turned toward her. Hope flickered on faces that had spent hours drowning in confusion. She stepped forward. This mess, she said gently, isn't about business. It's about language and culture and the respect that got lost between the lines. Sterling stared at her like she'd spoken magic. In a way, she had. What will happen when she reveals the truth in all 6 languages, right in front of the men who doubted her? The air in the suite tightened as Liana stepped inside. Sterling's consultants whispered urgently, Who let her in? Is she even cleared to be here? This is outrageous. But Liana didn't look at them. She looked at the diplomats, faces exhausted, tense, each carrying the weight of a country's expectations. She spoke first to the Japanese delegate. Ambassador Tanaka, she said softly in flawless Japanese. Your message yesterday wasn't a yes, It was a polite warning that the timeline threatened cultural commitments. They misinterpreted your courtesy as agreement. The ambassador's head snapped up, eyes sharpening with recognition and relief. Then she turned to the German representative, seamlessly shifting languages. Herr Schneider, your concerns weren't about refusing flexibility, she said in precise German. You were asking for respect toward the engineering process, something the translation completely failed to convey. The room went still. Even Sterling froze, cigar halfway to his lips. Finally, she addressed the French delegate with a quiet grace. Monsieur Leclerc, when you said, this approach lacks sincerity, you meant it lacked transparency, not that you opposed the agreement. Her French rolled effortlessly, warm, respectful. For a moment, no one moved, no one breathed. Then Ambassador Tanaka, the man who had barely tolerated Sterling for 2 days, slowly stood. Miss, he asked gently, who taught you to listen so deeply? Liana swallowed, her throat tight. My grandmother, she whispered. She cleaned hotel rooms for 40 years, but she believed every human heart speaks its own language, and if you learn to hear it, you can fix almost anything. Something shifted in the room. The tension, the frustration, the distrust. It cracked, and through the cracks, possibility glimmered. Sterling finally found his voice. All right, he muttered in disbelief. Prove it. Fix this. Liana nodded once. Then let's begin. But when Liana steps into the negotiation room the next morning, someone powerful is already plotting to stop her. By sunrise, the private conference chamber was buzzing with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Liana walked in, wearing the same housekeeping uniform. Only now, every pair of eyes followed her. Some hopeful, some doubtful, some hostile. Sterling's lead advisor, Victoria Hale, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear. This is absurd. A girl with a mop is going to lead international discussions? Liana heard it, so did the ambassadors. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she placed her grandmother's worn notebook on the table, its edges frayed, its pages filled with wisdom in 6 languages. Ambassador Schneider leaned forward, fascinated. What is this? He asked. Everything I've learned from the people the world forgets, Liana replied. Housekeepers, taxi drivers, immigrants, refugees, guests no one speaks to. They taught me more about diplomacy than any university. Before anyone could respond, Victoria Hale stepped to Sterling's side. This is dangerous, she hissed. What will the board say if we put her in charge? Sterling's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Victoria pressed harder. Sir, she has no credentials, no clearance, no training. If anything goes wrong, it all falls on you. Liana kept her eyes forward, but her hands trembled beside her notebook. Ambassador Tanaka stood suddenly, his voice calm but firm. Credentials, he said, are meaningless without comprehension. Yesterday your team had titles. Only she had understanding. Victoria's face tightened, but she wasn't done. While Liana began explaining cultural missteps from the previous day, Victoria silently stepped out of the room, phone already in hand. She was calling Sterling's board. She was calling higher-ups. She was calling anyone who could shut Liana down, and she was doing it fast. Inside the room, Liana continued bridging languages, explaining, connecting, healing tensions that had stalled for weeks. Outside the room, Victoria Hale was igniting a fire meant to destroy her. What happens when the board arrives and threatens to remove Liana moments before the real negotiations begin? The double doors burst open with a force that made everyone turn. 3 sharply dressed board members swept into the negotiation chamber like a storm, faces stiff, eyes already judging. Victoria Hale followed behind them, lips curved in a triumphant smirk. There she is, Victoria announced, pointing at Liana like she was contraband. The unvetted staff member interfering with international discourse. Sterling stood abruptly. I invited her, he snapped. But the board chair, Mr. Langford, sliced a hand through the air. Save it, Sterling. We received complaints from 3 governments last night, concerns about protocol violations. Ambassador Leclerc stood. That is untrue, he said firmly. We submitted no such complaints. Ambassador Tanaka rose next. Nor did we. The Arabic delegate followed. Our office sent praise, not protest. Victoria's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered. The issue, she pressed, isn't their opinion, it's the rules. She is not authorized. Mr. Langford turned cold eyes on Liana. Ms. Brooks, is it? Do you have a degree in diplomatic strategy, government clearance, any formal qualifications at all? Liana lifted her chin. No, I don't. A ripple of whispers rolled across the room. Victoria folded her arms triumphantly, but Liana kept speaking. What I do have, she said softly, is the trust of the people in this room, because I hear them, not just their words, but what they mean. She shifted effortlessly into Japanese, into German, into French, into Arabic. 6 languages in fluid waves, each sentence aimed precisely, respectfully, with perfect inflection. The board members stared, stunned, but Victoria recovered first. Impressive parlor tricks, she scoffed. But this summit is not a talent show. She has no place at this table. Sterling slammed his hand on the desk. She saved the summit yesterday. And she might destroy it today, Victoria countered. We cannot risk the reputation of this company on a housekeeper. The words stung, sharp and familiar. But before Liana could respond, Ambassador Schneider spoke, his voice ringing across the chamber. Then risk it on us, he said, because if she goes, we go. The room froze. Every diplomat nodded, one by one, united, standing behind her. The board members blinked in disbelief. Langford's voice dropped to a harsh whisper. Sterling, fix this, now! The fate of the entire summit, and Liana's future, hung by a thread. But Sterling's decision will shock everyone, even Liana. The room held its breath as Sterling stepped forward. He looked between the board members, the diplomats, and Liana, still standing in her worn housekeeping uniform, gripping her grandmother's notebook like a lifeline. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, I won't remove her, Sterling finally declared. Not when she's the only one who actually listened, Victoria's jaw dropped. Richard, she hissed, you are throwing your entire career away on someone who's proven herself, he interrupted sharply. Something none of you bothered to do. Langford's face hardened. Fine. Then here are your consequences. If she stays, Sterling, you take full responsibility. And if this summit falls apart, so do you. Sterling didn't blink. So be it! Gasps rippled through the room. The diplomats exchanged glances, not of shock, but respect. Liana felt her throat tighten. No one had ever risked anything for her, not like this. Sterling turned toward her, his voice low but steady. Miss Brooks, if you still want to help us, this summit is yours to guide. Her eyes burned. She nodded. And the moment she stepped to the center of the table, the room shifted around her. No longer the invisible girl in a uniform. No longer the staff member dismissed at the doorway. Here, now, she was the bridge. She opened her grandmother's notebook, her hands steadied. Let's begin, she said softly, and the world began to listen. But far down the hallway, a security guard hurried toward the room with urgent news. Something had just happened, something that threatened everything Liana had worked for. What crisis erupts next? One that could destroy the entire summit within minutes. The conference room had finally settled into a steady rhythm, voices calmer, notes organized, hope cautiously returning. When the doors swung open again, a security officer rushed in, breathing hard. Mr. Sterling, urgent! You need to see this. Sterling strode out. Liana followed, anxiety gripping her ribs. They were led to a side room where a large security monitor glowed with a headline spreading across international news. Confidential summit files leaked. Private comments between nations exposed. Liana's stomach dropped. The screen showed private memos, unpolished opinions, frustrated remarks. Things never meant to see daylight. German criticisms of Japanese timelines, Japanese doubts about American sincerity, French frustration about profit motives, Arab delegates questioning Western priorities. 6 nations, 6 sets of misunderstandings, all exposed, all twisted into ugly headlines. Sterling rubbed his forehead, pale as marble. This could end the summit, he murmured. Liana scrolled through the leaked messages. She saw words taken out of context, nuances flattened, frustrations magnified. The nations wouldn't just be angry, they'd be humiliated. And humiliation is harder to repair than conflict. The security officer cleared his throat. We believe the leak came from inside the hotel staff network. Sterling turned to Liana immediately. I know what you're thinking, she said quietly, but I didn't do this. He didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. She could see the doubt flicker. The same doubt she had seen her whole life, familiar as a shadow. Liana stepped closer. Look at me, she said softly. You know me better than that. The doubt in Sterling's eyes shifted, just a little, but it didn't vanish. Before he could speak, another headline flashed across the screen. Arab delegation threatens to walk out. Trust is broken. Tokyo officials demand immediate accountability. German ministry pauses cooperation, pending investigation. The summit wasn't crumbling. It was collapsing. Sterling whispered, God help us, everything's falling apart. Liana closed her eyes, hearing her grandmother's voice again. Baby, when the bridge collapses, you build a new one. She turned back toward the conference room. I'm going to talk to them, she said. Sterling stared at her like she'd lost her mind. Liana, no, they're furious. They won't listen. Yes, she agreed softly. They will, because this time, someone is finally going to tell them the truth. She pushed open the doors. The entire room snapped toward her, anger, betrayal, disbelief flaming in their eyes. But she didn't flinch. She stepped to the center. Everything now depended on the next words she spoke. But before Liana can calm the room, one ambassador publicly accuses her of causing the leak. The moment Liana stepped inside, Ambassador Leclerc slammed a folder onto the table. Tell me, he demanded, why we should not believe you were involved in this leak. It felt like being struck, hard. Not because he yelled, but because behind his anger lived deep disappointment, the kind that cuts more deeply than insults ever could. Liana lifted her chin. Ambassador, I didn't leak anything. Leclerc fired back. Someone from the staff did. Someone with access. Someone who was present during private conversations. His meaning was clear. Victoria Hale stood near the wall, arms crossed, eyes gleaming. She said nothing, but her silence poured fuel on the fire. Ambassador Schneider added sharply, This breach shows knowledge of cultural sensitivities, knowledge you demonstrated yesterday. Not an accusation, a hypothesis, but it hit like a blade. Liana could feel dozens of eyes stabbing into her. Her palms grew warm around her grandmother's notebook. Her voice stayed steady. You think I used your trust to embarrass you all? No one answered. The silence hurt more than shouting. She took a long breath. Then did the one thing no diplomat, advisor, or board member had dared to do that morning. She acknowledged the pain. You have every right to be angry, she said softly. Not because your words were revealed, but because they were revealed without context, without explanation, without respect for the truth. Ambassador Tanaka narrowed his eyes. And what is the truth, Miss Brooks? Liana stepped forward, slow, deliberate, respectful. You weren't insulting each other. You were being honest in private, because the summit kept demanding polite agreements instead of real conversations. A ripple went through the room. She continued. Your words weren't attacks, they were fears. Your disagreements weren't betrayal, they were warnings. Your frustrations weren't disrespect, they were urgency. She placed her grandmother's notebook gently on the table. This leak didn't expose your failures, she said. It exposed the lies you've been forced to tell each other because you weren't allowed to speak openly. Silence, heavy, electric. Ambassador Leclerc's anger wavered. Ambassador Schneider looked uncertain. Ambassador Tanaka's hands slowly relaxed. Liana didn't let the moment die. You don't need me to translate your languages today, she said. You need me to translate your truths. Sterling watched her like he was seeing her for the first time. Then Liana made the most dangerous offer of the entire summit. Give me 10 minutes, she said. 10 minutes to explain the meaning behind each leaked message, in front of every nation, so nothing is misunderstood again. The room buzzed. 10 minutes to fix global humiliation. 10 minutes to rebuild collapsing trust. 10 minutes to save a summit worth billions? Ambassador Tanaka finally spoke. You believe you can accomplish what our teams failed to achieve in 6 months? Liana didn't blink. No, she said. I know I can. The diplomats exchanged glances, and for the first time since the leak, hope flickered. But when Liana begins to explain the leaked messages, she exposes a truth that will stun every nation in the room. Liana stepped to the center of the conference chamber, folding her hands over her grandmother's notebook. She looked at each ambassador in turn. Before I explain what your leaked messages meant, she said softly, I need you to hear something none of your advisors had the courage to say. Every representative leaned in, despite themselves. Liana continued, Those leaked comments weren't mistakes. A murmur rippled around the room. Sterling blinked. Victoria Hale stiffened. The real problem, Liana said, carefully enunciating every word, is that you were forced to hide the truth from each other. You weren't allowed to say what you really felt, because diplomacy punished honesty. She turned to the German ambassador. Herr Schneider, your memo wasn't criticizing Japanese tradition. It was frustration that your warnings about infrastructure timelines kept being dismissed. Then she pivoted gracefully to the Japanese ambassador. And, Ambassador Tanaka, your private cable wasn't belittling German efficiency. You were expressing a fear that environmental harmony might be sacrificed for speed. Both men looked shaken, as if someone had finally said out loud the thing they were too proud or too pressured to admit. Next, she addressed the French ambassador. Ambassador Leclerc, your concern about profit motives wasn't cynicism. It was a plea for fairness, a plea to ensure climate solutions don't become corporate trophies instead of human protection. Leclerc stared at her, speechless. Then Liana lifted her grandmother's notebook and opened to a worn page. Every leaked message, she said, had a single thread running through it. She paused, letting the room go silent. What thread? Ambassador Tanaka finally asked. Liana held up the page. Fear, she said, not of each other, but of failing the world. Gasps echoed, not dramatic ones, human ones, realizations dawning. Liana stepped closer to the table. You weren't judging each other. You were afraid of letting your countries down, afraid of choosing wrong, afraid of wasting time the planet doesn't have. Her voice softened. And fear, she whispered, is the most honest language in the world. Ambassador Schneider removed his glasses. Ambassador Leclerc's anger dissolved into something gentler. Ambassador Tanaka bowed his head slightly, deeply moved. Sterling stared at Liana like she had just rebuilt the summit with her bare hands. But Victoria Hale, she wasn't moved at all. Her eyes narrowed. She turned to her phone, typed something quickly. Liana didn't notice. Because in that moment, 6 nations were hanging on to her every word, and she was about to give them a revelation that would shift the entire room's direction. But right as Liana delivers her final explanation, Victoria triggers a move that threatens to destroy Liana's credibility completely. Liana drew a slow breath and continued, ready to close the gap between nations once and for all. Now, she said gently, let me explain the meaning behind each leaked phrase so there are no more misunderstandings. But before she could turn the page, Victoria Hale's voice cut through the room like shattered glass. I think they should see this first. Everyone turned. Victoria held up her phone triumphantly. On the screen was a security log, timestamps, access records, digital entries highlighted in red. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, this shows that someone with housekeeping access codes logged into a restricted network hours before the leak. The diplomats tensed instantly. Sterling looked alarmed. Victoria turned the screen toward Liana. And guess whose access badge was used? Liana felt her heart stop. Her badge number glowed brightly on the screen. Whispers exploded across the room. The French delegation stiffened. The Japanese ambassador's eyes widened. Even Sterling took half a step back. Liana shook her head slowly. No, that's impossible. My badge was with me all night. Victoria shrugged with false sympathy. Or perhaps the perfect little polyglot isn't as innocent as she seems. Sterling's face twisted. Victoria, are you sure this is legitimate? Oh yes, she said sweetly. I had it verify it. The room darkened with suspicion. Liana forced herself to speak through the tightness in her throat. Listen to me. I did not leak anything. Someone used my badge. Someone inside this building. Victoria folded her arms. How convenient. Liana felt anger rise, sharp, foreign, shaking. She'd been underestimated her whole life. Ignored, talked down to, overlooked. But framed? This was new. She pressed a hand over her grandmother's notebook. My badge must have been copied, she insisted. Or duplicated, or… And how would a housekeeper know anything about network duplication? Victoria shot back. The implication was heavy, ugly. The diplomats exchanged tense looks. For the first time, they doubted her. Ambassador Schneider spoke cautious. Miss Brooks, can you prove your innocence? Liana swallowed, her voice nearly cracked. No, not yet, but I will. Ambassador Leclerc sighed. This is very serious. Ambassador Tanaka lowered his gaze. Trust, once shaken, is difficult to restore. Liana felt her chest tighten painfully. She had been on the edge of saving everything. Now she stood on the edge of losing everything. Then a voice rose from the back of the room, low, steady, certain. I can prove she didn't do it. Everyone turned, and the person standing there shocked the entire room. Who stepped forward to defend Liana? And what secret are they about to reveal? All eyes shifted toward the back of the room. Standing there, wringing her hands, trembling but determined, was Maria, the night cleaner who worked alongside Liana. The same woman who had covered Liana's shift the night before. Her voice wavered at first. I saw something, she said. About the badge. Victoria's smirk hardened instantly. Oh, please, she scoffed. This is your witness? A janitor? The word hit the room like poison. Liana stepped protectively beside Maria. Let her speak, she said firmly. Maria swallowed hard, then lifted her chin. Last night, she began, I was cleaning the service hallway on level 49. I saw someone wearing a staff jacket that didn't fit them, take Liana S. badge from her cart. The room's tension sharpened. Maria continued. At first, I thought maybe it was a new employee, but then I saw them slip into the restricted IT hallway where none of us are allowed. Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically. And who was this mysterious figure? Did you catch their face? Yes, Maria said. Victoria froze. Everyone leaned forward. Maria pointed across the room. Her finger extended slowly, deliberately, and landed on Victoria Hale. Gasps erupted. Sterling's eyes widened. Ambassador Schneider nearly dropped his pen. Victoria's face drained of all color. That's ridiculous, she spat. She's lying. Maria lifted her cleaning gloves, still stained with dust and chemical cleaner. No, ma'am. I know what I saw. It was you. You were wearing the wrong-sized staff jacket, and you used a universal override key. The diplomats turned toward Victoria now, eyes narrow, distrust simmering. Liana's heart pounded. It made sense. Too much sense. Victoria had doubted her from the moment she opened her mouth. Victoria had called the board before the negotiations. Victoria had access to everything, and the motive to sabotage Liana. But Maria wasn't done. She took a shaky breath and said the words that shifted the room's entire energy. I followed her, just far enough to see her open a restricted server cabinet. Silence, dead, heavy, accusing. Victoria snapped. This is absurd. I've worked in this industry for 20 years. You think I'd sabotage a global summit over a housekeeper? Maria didn't blink. You weren't sabotaging the summit, she said softly. You were sabotaging her. And suddenly, everyone understood. Victoria hadn't feared Liana failing. She had feared Liana succeeding. Sterling clenched his fists. His voice came low. Victoria, tell me Maria is lying. Victoria opened her mouth. No words came out. None. Her silence was confession. Ambassador Tanaka murmured, "Deception does not age well under truth." Victoria took a step back. For the first time, she realized she had lost. But exposing the saboteur won to be enough, because the nations still have to decide whether they trust Liana to lead the final negotiation or walk away forever. Sterling turned slowly toward Liana, his expression filled with something between guilt and awe. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have trusted you." Liana didn't answer. She wasn't angry, just tired, and hurt in a way she didn't want to show. Ambassador Leclerc stood first. "Miss Brooks," he said gently, "your innocence is clear, but the question remains, can this summit still be saved?" Liana looked around the room. 6 nations. A billion eyes watching from the world outside. Tension thick as fog. She could have broken. She could have stepped back. She could have let the diplomats handle the rest. Instead, she opened her grandmother's notebook. Hands steady now. Voice strong. "Yes," she said. "It can be saved, but only if you let me finish what I started." Ambassador Schneider leaned forward. "And what is that?" Liana walked to the center of the table, resting her palms gently on the polished surface. "Honesty," she said. "Not the polished, diplomatic kind, the real kind, the painful kind, the kind you hide in private memos." She looked each ambassador in the eyes. "You all care. More than the leak showed, more than your anger showed, more than your fear showed." The room softened. Their faces shifted. She continued, "I can translate your words, but only you can choose to trust again." Absolute silence followed. No rustling papers, no whispers, only the weight of hope and risk and possibility. Then, Ambassador Tanaka stood, slowly, formally, respectfully. "Miss Brooks," he said, bowing his head, "you may lead us." The German ambassador rose next. "Ja," he said simply. "Lead." The French ambassador followed. "With clarity, mademoiselle." Then the Arab delegate. "With courage." Then the Chinese representative. With truth. One by one, 6 nations rose, united, waiting for her. Liana felt her breath hitch. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her heart, "I told you, baby. Every language is a bridge." She stepped forward. "Then let's finish building it," she said, and the room leaned in, ready to begin the most honest negotiation in modern history. But now that the nations trust her, can Liana actually guide them to a final agreement before the deadline hits? The hardest part is still ahead. Time was slipping through their fingers. The summit had 2 hours before the world declared it a failure. 6 nations gathered around one table, eyes fixed on Liana, the same young woman who, hours earlier, was sweeping floors unnoticed. Liana took a breath, slid her grandmother's notebook to the center, and spoke. "We cannot negotiate like diplomats today," she said gently. "We must speak like human beings." Then she did the unthinkable. She invited each ambassador to share one honest fear in their own language. Ambassador Tanaka spoke first, voice weighted with centuries of tradition. Liana translated softly. He fears losing his people's heritage in the rush toward modern solutions. The German ambassador followed. He fears building something fast that collapses even faster. The French ambassador, he fears that climate justice becomes climate inequality. The Arabic representative, he fears that the desert cultures, keepers of ancient environmental wisdom, will be ignored. The Chinese delegate, he fears that cooperation will be mistaken for weakness. Every truth spilled into the open, raw, human, unfiltered. And Liana translated each one not just with accuracy, but with care. Then she spoke. "Your fears don't divide you, they complete you." She walked around the table, pointing gently. "Japan brings harmony, Germany brings structure, France brings diplomacy, the Arab League brings ancestral wisdom, China brings innovation, and America brings resources." Her voice thickened with emotion. Put them together, and you have the solution the world has been praying for. Silence. And then, Ambassador Schneider whispered, "Let's sign it." Ambassador Leclerc nodded. Ambassador Tanaka exhaled, his shoulders finally lowering. 6 pens lifted, 6 signatures formed, and just like that, the Earth Harmony Accord was born. A global agreement built not on politics, but on truth. A standing ovation erupted. Ambassadors, aides, staff, security. Everyone rose to their feet. Sterling looked at Liana with awe. "You didn't just save the summit," he said. "You saved us from ourselves." But Liana only smiled softly. "My grandmother saved me first." But one final moment, one deeply personal moment, is still waiting for Liana. A moment she's dreamed of her entire life. Hours later, after the world signed one of the most important agreements in modern history, Liana slipped away from the celebration. She needed one moment alone. One breath. One chance to let it all sink in. Her phone buzzed. A video call. Her heart jumped. "Grandma," Liana answered, and there she was, lying in her hospital bed, wrapped in warm blankets, eyes shining like she held the sun inside them. "Baby girl," her grandmother whispered, tears glittering. "I saw it. I saw the whole world listening to you." Liana couldn't speak. Her voice broke under the weight of love. "You stood there," her grandmother continued, "with your little notebook, using every word I ever taught you. And you healed people who forgot how to hear each other." Tears rolled down Liana's cheeks. "You taught me everything," Liana whispered. "Every word, every meaning, every heart." Her grandmother smiled through her tears. "No, Mia. You found the courage to speak them." Behind Liana, ambassadors approached, each wanting to thank her again. But Liana held up a hand and turned back to the screen. This moment belonged to the woman who had started it all. "I'm proud of you," her grandmother said in 6 languages, one after another, voice trembling but strong. "And the whole world is proud of you too." The call ended, but the warmth remained. Liana stepped back into the ballroom, staff members cheering as she passed. Maria hugged her tightly. Sterling announced her new title to the world, Director of Global Cultural Negotiation. The crowd roared, but Liana didn't hear applause. She heard her grandmother's voice, and the quiet promise she made years ago, "I will build bridges where none exist." And now, she finally had. If this story touched you, hit like right now. Share it with someone who's been underestimated their whole life. And comment below, what hidden skill are you carrying that the world hasn't seen yet? Your comment might inspire someone who really needs it today. And if you think this story was intense, wait until you hear the next one. It begins with a young black girl, a first-time flyer, and a flight attendant who told her, "You don't belong up here." But what happens next doesn't just challenge that cruelty. It inspires a movement that changes the world. Get ready for Flight Attendant Told Black Girl, "You don't belong up here." Then Brave Girls Change the World. You won't want to miss it.